Welcome. Today I'm going to do something I haven't done before. Well, I sort of have done it before, just not with this kind of clay. Because I'm going to do a tall pot, maybe 40, 50 centimeters, something like that. But I'm going to throw it in the Ashraf Hanna clay that I talked about in the last couple of videos. It's a clay that is formulated by the artist, the pottery artist, ceramic artist, Ashraf Hanna, specifically for ragu. But it is also very good for pitfire because it have a lot of grog in it, so it's a very stable clay. It can sustain almost any kind of thermal shock. But I haven't done sectional throwing with this clay before, so now I'm going to try that. In case you haven't seen my videos before about sectional throwing, it's a technique where if you want to throw a tall pot and you're not able to handle all that clay and pull up the clay to the height you want, then you can do it in sections. So basically, you just throw one section first, the lower part of your pot, then you remove it from your wheel, or if you have two wheels, you can do it on a second wheel, and you do the second part. Turn it around and put it on top of that. And then the trick is, of course, to glue them together so they become one pot and don't crack in that where they join. So that's what I'm going to do. And I've done it a lot with other types of clay, but I've never done it with this clay. It should work. It should actually be easier because it's a very stable and strong clay, but there might be something that I haven't thought about, some challenges, but we'll see. Anyway, the way that I do it is I start with the biggest piece of clay first for a couple of reasons. First of all, I want a good solid base, and I can easily handle 4, 5, 6, 7 kilo. So I'm gonna use, I think 3, 4 kilos something for the base of it. The other reason is that the base is of course gonna have a button. The top part is gonna have holes in both ends. So I'm not gonna use so much clay as I do for the base part of it. So I'm going to start with this, and then I have another piece that's a little bit small I'm going to use for the top. So let's start with the bottom. I always clap center my clay a little bit, especially with a big piece of clay. It makes a lot of sense because then you don't have to spend all that strength trying to push it into the right position. See, I pushed it too much, so it kind of slipped the bat. So I'm gonna put it into position again. A lot of times when you have to center a big bowl like this, it's not a super big bowl, but still on the bigger side, it helps to use your fingers instead of your hand. Because when you use your whole, the palm of your hand, you have to move a lot of clay. When you use the tip of your fingers, you only move small pieces of clay at a time. And that, of course, is a lot easier. So I think it's beginning to look okay. It's of course always important to center your clay well, because if it's not centered well at this stage, then when you start pulling it, it just gets worse and worse and worse. But it's even more important when you're making very tall or very wide things. Basically, any big pot, it becomes even more important. It can be difficult to judge how thick the bottom is when you're dealing with, especially when you're dealing with a big lump of clay. So I would rather start with making it a little bit too thick, because you can always make it thinner. And then also trying to move all that clay at once is difficult. So what I basically do is I use my fingers like that, and I push it in, and then I push it up, push it in, push it up. That way I only have to move again a little bit of the clay at a time. See, that's much easier. And then always compress the rim to make sure that you stay centered. And now that you open up the ball or the bowl, it's easier to measure the thickness of your button. In this case, it's way too thick. It's about, I would say, maybe 2 centimeters. And I would like it to get maybe down to about 1 centimeter or something. So we definitely need to remove some. But that's not so difficult. I had one time making a really big pot, and I ended up with the button being too thin. And of course, it has to be a little bit thicker for a big pot like this. And it was just getting too thin. And I tried to make it thicker, and I failed. So I learned the hard way. It's better to start out with a button that is a little bit too thick than it is to make it too thin. And besides, you can always trim it out if it's too thick. So now it's beginning to look good. And as always, compress the button. Better to compress it too much than too little. By compressing it, you are avoiding getting these terrible S cracks. You've probably seen them, like an S in the bottom of your pot. It's terrible. And it can completely ruin a pot if it goes all the way through, of course. It just doesn't look good anyway. So by compressing it, that's your best weapon against S cracks. So I'm just going to check it one more time. It's still rather thick. I think I can take a little more. And of course, the clay that I'm now removing from the bottom, moving into the sides of the pot, I can use for the height. Also, at this stage, of course, you should know what sort of shape you're making, because the lower part that I'm throwing now, I need to dry it a little bit so it's strong enough to add the other part on top of that. So that means it's a little less flexible. I can still expand it a little bit and stuff, but I can't fundamentally change the shape of it. But in this case, I'm going to do a very classical shape going up like this, and then going in at the top with a nice little neck. I'm just gonna compress it a little more with my rib. So I think that looks good. And I'm just gonna color it in a little bit because I don't want it to flare out too much to begin with, because I need some height. And if it flares out too much, then it will be very difficult to get it in. It's much easier to expand it a little bit if I don't get it wide enough. As usual, I want to remove some of the water that I got inside, because I don't want it to soak for too long and weaken the clay. That's also something that can contribute to acid cracks. So now I'm going to slowly pull the hide. I'm trying to keep it as narrow as possible. So far, so good. Now, the tricky part when you get taller, and I'm not perfect with that, but the tricky part is that you need to keep your arm like that. And no, it would be very relaxing to keep it like that, but then you're going to pull the pot out of shape there. So keeping it very horizontal or vertical like this, it feels a little bit awkward, but it's necessary. I like to keep it clean as I can, because it's just this messy, but it also helps me to see the actual shape of the pot. So yeah, it's a good basic cylinder shape. Now I'm thinking, can I pull a little more height out of it? I mean, if this was the finished pot, I would definitely make it thinner, but this is not the finished pot. It is the lower part of a multi-sectional pot. And therefore, it needs to be a little thicker. It needs to be able to sustain the next part that we're going to put on top. So I think maybe a little bit, but not too much. So now I have to stand up to be able to do that. So now we'll slowly expand it. I want it to be a little bit wider here, and then the next section is going to continue getting a little bit wider until it goes in. Now, the difficult part here is not to lose too much height as I expand it. I mean, naturally, it would lose height if I expand it, but if I pull it the same time as I expand it, I can, if I'm lucky enough, good enough, I can maintain most of the height. Now, when you work with larger pots like this, it's also a good idea to walk away from your wheel to watch it at a distance, because when you're too close up, it can be really difficult to see the shape. For example, is this going out enough now, or should it go further out? That's something that's very difficult to judge when I'm sitting this close to the pot. Also, when you have to attach another pot on top of it, it is of course very important that it's completely circular. If it wobbles a little bit, then the next part you're going to put on is very difficult to fit. And of course, have to be very even on the top. So always compress the rim a little bit whenever I finish a pull or shape. I think it's beginning to look okay. I'll just walk away a little bit to see the shape. Yeah, I like this. So now I have to prepare the pot for the next section. Now, the way that you attach the next section, there are different strategies for that. You can do it flat to flat, so like the two pieces just attaching each other like that. Or you can make it an inward groove and then make it the other way on the other pot and fit them into each other. But what I found over the years is that by making a small groove on this and making the other section a little more tipped, that sort of helped me align them into position. And I found that to be the easiest way to make them fit perfectly. But as I said, there are different ways to do it, and you have to work out what works best for you. But in this case, what I do is I will make a small groove. So I'll just move the camera a little bit closer so you can see how I do that. So now we're ready to make the groove. To begin with, I like it the top to be completely flat. So I use a rim for that. I think like that. And then you can either use a finger or a tool or a combination of that. I found that it works best for me if I start out with a tool. So something like this, sort of rounded here. And then also what I found very important is to wet it up, because you need it to be easy to sort of work your way into it. And now don't go too fast. And keep your hands on both sides of it to position it. And then slowly work your way down. It's important that it is centered the same way all the way around the pot. And see now, slowly we're getting this groove. Now we have the basic groove. Now I like to expand it just a little bit. And for that, I use my finger. And again, I wet it up. And then if I use whatever size finger works here, my little finger maybe. Something like that. So now we have a guide for the next section to go into. So basically it has to fit this hole. Just gonna make sure that it doesn't stick out too much here. And as you see, it's very circular now, it's very flat, and that's what we need. I'm gonna leave some water here because I don't want this to dry out too much. I'm not gonna leave it floating, but gonna leave it moist. But now, for the rest of the pot, I need it to be as strong as possible, but still wet enough to attach and do the final shaping of. So I'm going to use a heat gun for that. I usually just use a heat gun like this. Some people like to use gas. You can even use like a weed burner, but it's not safe in here. So I use this one. It feels a little more safe, and it takes a little more time, but I'm just gonna heat it. It's especially that upper 2/3 of it that needs to be stronger, because that's where we attach the pot. But we don't want this, the very top, to be too dry, because if it's too dry, it's difficult to make the two pieces of clay, the two pots, to make them attach well enough. So you gotta work with that. So we're gonna heat it up. I think it's good enough for now. I will put it aside because now I have to do the top part, so it will naturally dry and strengthen a little bit more. And then by the end, just before I put the other one on top of this, I'll just secure that it's strong enough, and I'll show you how to do that. But before I move this, I have to measure it because, as I said, the other one have to fit perfectly onto this. And remember, I'm gonna turn it around So the upper part of the pot that I throw now is going to attach to this, and the lower part is going to be the top. So in other words, this new pot is going to be similar to this one because it's going to be widest at the top, right attached here, and then it will expand a little bit more, and then it will go into the neck. So I have to measure this and have to be very precise. And for that, I use a caliper. There are many different kinds. I have a very simple one in metal here. And I'm going to measure the middle of this because I want to measure the exactly the width of the wall, which is like the middle of this groove. I think this is going to be perfect. So now I can remove this and make the top section. And of course, doing so, you have to be very careful because you don't want to shake it around and get it out of shape now that I made it so perfect. So, just like that. So now I'm ready to do the top part. And as you can see, this bowl is a little bit smaller than the lower part. And but I think it's going to be almost the same height because I remember I'm not going to have any bottom. It's going to have hole both in the bottom and in the top. However, I'm not going to make it the full width, the hole, because then it only glues to the walls. And that's going to make it very unstable. And when I turn it around, there's a risk that it's going to drop. So I'm going to leave it a little bit thicker there. So in other words, the wall's going to go like this and then out. So I'm going to have a hole big enough for my hand to go in and start working with the clay, but not so small that there's not enough attachment. So let's make the top. And again, have to think in reverse because the top is going to go on the top of that one. So I'm going to reverse it. And the bottom here is going to be the top of the final pot. So now we're ready to open. And again, I'm going to go all the way down to the bat, or the wheel head if you're not using bats. But in this case, you have to use a bat because otherwise you won't be able to turn it around, at least not in an easy way. So. I'm constantly pushing down on the rim to make sure that it's even and it's flat. Because remember, this part is going to attach to the lower part. So it has to be completely circular and very even. Otherwise, it's not going to look good when I put them together. So now if you could look down here, I have a hole about this size. That's all the way down to the bed. But from here, I'm going to leave some clay. So it's going to be thicker down here than the actual wall is going to end up. But that's because I want enough clay to attach to the bed so it doesn't glide off or fall off when I turn it around. So again, compressing the rim just to make sure that it's even and circular. I mean, worst case, if it doesn't turn out even and circular, you can of course cut it off like always. But I like to keep it thrown perfectly here. So again, compress it. And again, I think I need to stand up for some of this. As you can see, it's almost, not entirely, but almost the same height as the other one, even though that it's a lot less clay. But of course that is because I'm not using any clay for the button, or very little. And now before I expand it more, I just want to check it's probably too small now. Yeah, it's at least a couple of centimeters too small. But that's good because, as I said many times before, it's a lot easier to expand than it is to make it smaller. There we go. So again, just going to measure. We still got, well, a centimeter or something to go. See, now we're getting very close. And I'm already now preparing this top for being round, because we want to, have a tip, rounded tip, so it fits into the groove that we created on the lower part. I think it's very close now. Yeah, it is. I think it's just a matter of 3 or 4 millimeters or something. And we are really talking millimeters. The more precise you can make it at this point, the easier the whole attachment is going to be. Yeah, see. Now I think it's perfect. So now I just want to make sure that I don't make it any smaller. It's very little likelihood for that, but I could accidentally make it wider, and I definitely don't want that. So I'm just gonna scrape off the slip on the outside and also on the inside. Gonna do it very lightly. So all that slip is just gonna keep the moist. So we want to get rid of that. So I'm just gonna see it again to be sure. Yeah, it's perfect. Yeah, that's perfect. Now there's still a little bit slip down here at the bottom. Just want to get rid of that. And now we have to dry this as well. Because even though there's not going to be anything put on top of this, it still have to be reversed. And my experience, if it's too wet, it will collapse. So we need to dry this as well. Now, I'm not going to waste your time looking at me drying the pot. So I'm going to come back to you in a few seconds when I'm ready to turn it on top of the other one. So now we are ready to put the top that we just made on top of the button that we made before. And I dried it with the heat gun, but how do you know if it's strong enough? Well, it is a matter of experience, but one thing you can do is try and wriggle the pot a little bit. In this case, I can feel that it feels very strong. I can't really wriggle it a lot, but it's still soft up here, so I think it should be strong enough. So now I want to prepare this part to be attached to the other. So I'm going to do a couple of things. First of all, I'm going to scratch a little bit in here to expand the surface and make it easier for the two parts to connect. I have this little scratcher here. You can also use like a fork or, something that can scratch it. I'm just going to use that now. You can see what it looks like here. Yeah, I just scratched it a little bit. And then I'm going to add some slip to it. And for the slip, I'm just going to take some from my bucket here. Have plenty of slip from when I was throwing. I'm just going to use this brush and just add some of it. Oh. It's okay if you add a little bit too much because it's just going to float out on the side, and you can move it when you add the other parts of it. So that's fine. So you don't want to have any lumps in there because that could create some air bubbles or air in there. So you don't want that. So this looks good. So now we're ready for the top part. This part is then going to be turned around and put on top here. And then I'm going to throw them together. But first, I also want to scratch this a little bit. So now where did I put it? Here. I want to scratch that part as well. So, see? You can see it, but it's scratched. And I'm also going to add a little bit of slip to that. We already have plenty on the lower part, but anyway, it's going to help. It is, of course, the weak point in this method of throwing. So it's very important that these two pieces are perfectly glued together. So now I'll turn this around and put it on top. Now, when you turn it around, you should not do it slowly, because if you do it slowly, then it will bend and will get out of shape. So I usually do it, I throw it up and then I turn it around really quickly. 1, 2, 3, whoop, like this. And now we just have to position it. First of all, see if it fits. It does fit. It looks good. And then I'm going to turn it around just very, very slowly to see if it's centered enough. It looks really good, right? That's good. I'm just going to make sure here that we won't trap any air or anything, but this looks good so far. So now we have to cut it loose. Don't cut it loose before you turn it around, because then it's going to fall down, of course. So we're going to take a wire and then cut it loose. Now, if you cut it loose just like that, then you're going to bend the whole pot out of shape. So I'm going to attach my chest here and make sure that I cut it all the way up and try not to bend it at all. It's usually quite easy to cut it off because I have very little attachment. So that's it. So now we have the two pieces together. And now it's time to glue them together. I usually start out by massaging this lower part of the groove that we created into the upper part. Just do it very slowly, carefully. This way we can also press out any air that might be trapped in there now, because we definitely don't want that. So now it should be sort of stable. See, it is bending a little bit, but that's not so bad. So now we're gonna wet the top here, so we can, so I can get my hand in there. Just gonna push this out a little bit so the hole gets bigger. And now I think there's almost room to get my hands in. And here, this part, we still have a little bit more clay thickness than we need, but we can keep throwing on that. But the most important part now is to get this attachment, this area where the two pieces are attached, glued together. So now I'm basically doing the same thing on the inside as I did on the outside. So I'm gluing it together, I'm pushing it out. So, and that looks good. And see, where we use the rib here. See, already now, you can hardly see that it's two pots. And that's exactly what we are trying to do. So now you can wet the pot up a little bit again. I don't want to make it dripping wet. I just want to dampen it a little bit. And now we will do the final shaping. I do need the ribs to go on the inside too here. And we want to expand the upper part so it continues the flow we made on the lower part. See, and now we have a continuous shape here, and it's actually here that we attach it, but you can hardly see that. This is exactly what we want. For this part, it also sort of helps with a bigger rib. See, now I don't think you can see where the two parts are attached. It looks like it's almost just one piece now, and that is exactly what we're looking for. I still want to continue the width a little more here. So let's see if we can expand it. Yeah. And you see, even though it's made of two pieces, it's surprisingly even. It's turning very evenly. So still want to expand it just a little bit here. So it's getting better. We still want the shoulder to be a little bit higher, maybe up here before we color it in. So it's slowly getting there. you can't really rush this. It takes the time it takes. So we still need it a little bit higher, I think. Yeah, I think that's good. It's a nice size pot. So now it's slowly getting there. It's a little bit of unevenness down this side, but some of this can be also handled in the final trimming. But I think all in all, it's a really nice shape. I like the shoulder to be a little bit higher, and I think I should be able to do that. And now to something difficult, because there's a little bit water down at the bottom. So I'll see if I can get that out. Yeah, it's pretty deep. Yeah, I think I got it. So I think it looks good. And so the experiment with this clay that I haven't used for sectional throwing before turned out to be pretty good. So I think it was a success. What do you think? Leave a comment. Now I'm just going to let it dry. And when I have big pots like this, I like to let them spin when they dry, because if they dry uneven, it could be because, I mean, there could be a little bit of a draft in the room or something. Maybe you open a door or something. And in that case, it may become uneven when it dries. And right now it looks so nice and even. And I want to maintain that. So I'm just going to let it spin really, really slowly. And then just maybe like that, because that's going to ensure that it's going to dry evenly. And then tomorrow, or maybe in 2 days, when it's leather hard, I will do the final trimming. I will cut off a little bit down here, still too thick here, and then we'll just perfect the shape. So that should be a good pot in the end. So I hope you enjoyed this exercise, and maybe you got inspired to do sectional throwing too. It's not that difficult. Of course, if you have two wheels, you don't need to take it on and off. You can throw the lower part on one wheel, the top part on the other, and then put it back on. I only have one of my favorite wheels, the simple wheel that I'm using now. So unfortunately, I have to take it back and take it off and take it back. Anyway, I hope to see you soon again. And when I do, I expect to pitfire this. I hope that you will join me and see the results. So until then, have a great day.